Hi everyone, just me working from home today. Unfortunately, Jane's still not too well. So she's had a kind of a flu bug that's been hard to shake off. So we thought easier today to do it from home. And we're going to be talking today all about the environment. And we're going to be particularly talking about the oceans and the trouble that the oceans are in. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of my thoughts about the future of where the environment might go. And we've got a great guest today that I'll be introducing a little bit in a moment after I've had a little talk with you first, called Rocky. Really, Ron Nordquist is our guest, and anything if you'll be able to find all his details and be able to contact him and find out about the sort of things he's doing for the environment in the description below afterwards. So I'm going to say first a few hellos to everybody. I say, first of all, hello to Sarah, because I saw you were in there quite early on. I don't know if you're still around, Sarah, but hi, thanks for coming in early. And straight in, Alexandra, nice to see you. You've been a lot, and you always have some good questions, and I'm sure you'll have some interesting ones for us today as well. Bit premature, Ethel, Craig and Jane, but I saw you coming just as before we went live and said that post. So nice to see you again. And who else we got here today? Hello, Greg and Jane. Looking forward to another great show. Love from Kentucky. Good. I'm glad we've got a lot of people coming in from America. And thank you for your thoughts for Jane. That's very kind of you, Jackie. She's doing okay. It's been that's a really difficult illness to shake off, with a lot of coughs and things like that. So not easy to do a show when you're not feeling you're feeling a bit under the weather and your voice is still croaky. And so good evening. So Steve's obviously in the UK from the flag. And right down I see there in Melbourne, Australia as well, where it's 4:02 a.m. Well done. Dedicated. And there's a few wishes going on there, I see. Thanks. She'll definitely, she's watching it, I think, upstairs. So I don't think she'll comment. But she's there in the background anyway. So today's show, we thought we'd set a theme today because we've got our guest coming on as you're joining us. I'll just repeat myself a little bit here. And we're going to talk particularly about the troubles the world's having with its environment, but in particular the oceans. And Rocky, who's joining me in a minute, he's done a lot of work with this. He's dedicated his life to this type of stuff. But let me just give you a few my thoughts first, and give you a chance to gather some questions as well, because those of you who are coming in, have a think about what sort of questions you'd perhaps like to ask Rocky, and also what you think about the environment and your thoughts about it, and your thoughts about what can we do, if anything, and what do you think the future of the world's going to be like with this. I mean, I think there's an awful lot of nonsense out there as well, I have to say, with some of the stuff that's thrown at us about the environment. And it's very hard with all stuff nowadays to be able to get a really clear understanding about what's really going on. For example, in Winchester, they've recently put up, I think about a year ago or something, they put up a statue of, at the Winchester University, a statue of Greta Thunberg, or Thunberg. I never get her name right when I pronounce it. And she's somebody I think has actually not done much good for the environment, frankly, because I personally find her very off-putting. That 11-year-old is that people bleat when they're 11 years old, and I've found her a bit of a sort of a tantrum sort of person, who became an expert, self-appointed expert, or a mother appointed her as an expert when she discovered her daughter had Asperger's, and I frankly don't think people like that have done any good for the cause of cleaning up the environment and climate change and the rest of it. And equally, climate deniers and tend to go on the other extreme. It seems everything nowadays isn't as extremes. We always seem to have to extremes with whatever views we have nowadays. And the climate deniers are also people that I think we have to put a lot of question marks around that as well, of course. So somewhere in between, there's a truth. And somewhere in between, we're beginning to see that, there does seem to be a bit of a crisis out there. particularly when we start to see it sometimes on our own doorsteps. We start to see, rubbish accumulating in places. We wonder what happens when, we all obediently go and put all our plastic into the appropriate bin, and then we read that bin has now been shipped off to be disposed of in China or Indonesia, which are two of the biggest polluters of the oceans in the world by a massive margin. And we ship stuff over there for it to be disposed of. Basically, we take all your corporation rubbish and we chuck it in the sea. So there's a lot of questions, and there's definitely going to be, and is, pretty huge problems. And I think in the future we're going to start to see the consequences of some of this, and we'll discuss some of these things this evening, I think. But I think there's going to be huge problems, not just with what we're getting with the pollution of the world, but the unprecedented, we might get unprecedented weather events. We've had some already, but whirlwinds and things like that. But how big could the winds become? How huge could the rainfall be? How enormous can the forest fires be that already have started to sweep the world, almost as an annual event? But these things are obviously getting worse and worse. And of course, deforestation as well as another one. And we see it on our own doorsteps. I've seen old oaks being torn down nearby. Just near me, there's an area called Fair Oaks. All the oaks have gone. Recently, they built whole new sort of these estates of houses with super packed housing put into a country setting, sort of like a little New York stuck in a country setting. And they have the cheek just down the road from us to call the road Bluebell Road. And there's not a bluebell in sight. Where the bluebells were are all gone now. So we seem to have almost a cynical attitude to our world, don't we? Have a cynical attitude to the way things are. And I think, some of the building programs that are out there are just basically wanton destruction. And we see it on our own doorstep here in the UK. Of course, because I'm in the south of England, where they're cramming more and more people into a smaller area because you can get better prices to develop green space, rather than if you were to redevelop some of the rundown city areas where you need to demolish everything before you build again and don't get the same views and therefore don't get the same value on your houses. So these are very, very great concerns, because we see it. And when I've been to India, huge mountains of plastic in Rishikesh, the holy site of Rishikesh, where everybody goes to do their yoga. It's the place where the Beatles went to meet the Maharishi, and it's still beautiful. The Ganges is beautiful there, but you only need to turn a corner or two, and people have been throwing the rubbish out the back door, off the side of the road, until literally there are mountains and mountains of plastic bottles, mainly because people need fresh water, so they drink out of freshwater bottles and they throw them away. And me too, I drank plastic from the bottled water. So these are some of the problems the world's facing, aren't they? And I am always a bit of a critic of China in so much of what I say on the shows, because I feel China is a country that's rampant capitalism, out of control, with a communist party at the reins. And these are the countries, China and Indonesia, for example, that I worry about. And we look here at the UK and think, we've got to do something. So we all try to clean up our act. We all try to build wind farms, and we try to look after our environment. And we don't generally see masses of rubbish on the roads in the UK. But I'm not quite sure the facts, but I think UK accounts for about 2% of the world's pollution, generally, and 2% towards climate change or something like that. So if we were to sink the UK tomorrow and pull it completely out the picture, it frankly wouldn't make a lot of difference, because our main problems, our main issues are the developing countries, and in particular China and Indonesia, where we buy all our cheap products from. Don't we? We just buy the stuff there, and then we throw it. We send it all back to be thrown away again. So we're to blame for buying it, and they're to blame for making it. And there's a vicious cycle going there. And so, what of the future? What will we see from all this? Where will it take us? I mean, population is one of the major problems that's making the world strain from overusing our resources and overusing the fact that we're throwing so much away. What would it take? Another pandemic? Would it take another pandemic to get the world right? Would there be? I think we will have another 2 pandemics in the future. Frankly, I think we'll have another one that will be much more serious than the one we've seen. But these pandemics, particularly a bacterial pandemic as opposed to a virus pandemic, could really wipe huge numbers of people out, and then our problems possibly solved. But surely we've got to find another way. We've got to find, I think we've got to start finding new technology, learning what to do with our plastics. Can we recycle them? Is there things we can do? And I think Rocky will help us a little bit with some of the thoughts about that, because I know he's done his best to look into these technologies and offers us something. And then also, again, just while I'm still with it, and I'll just continue this little introductory talk before we take a few of your questions and bring Rocky in to have a chat with us as well. What can we do? What will there be for the future? I mean, in some of my predictions, I have said, and I said some years ago, I said that I saw the coming of ocean parks, and this has become a much bigger proposition now. More and more people are, more and more countries are beginning to sort of put areas aside for parklands, untouched areas of the sea, to help it recover. I also noticed that recently here around the UK, they discovered that there's a whole area just south of Cornwall, where Pat comes from, who was also used to going to come in later with some of our patrons who will be able to talk to us. But with the whole seagrass area, which is very, very reassuring, because they didn't even know this existed, and it has tremendous ability to absorb oxygen, for example. And near the Galapagos Islands recently too, I heard on the news just recently, they found a new pristine, untouched coral reef. So there's quite a lot of hope sometimes that, there's still parts of nature that can help us recover. But if we keep chucking junk at it, and that junk sinks under the sea, then we're in some problems, And I think there will be in the future, perhaps, I've talked about these things, but I won't go into them now. But I've talked about in some of my other videos about the way we will redesign cities in the future. And I do feel that a great hope will be the discovery of a form of energy that is pollution free, that could lead ultimately to the greening of Australia and the Sahara. But the oceans are in trouble, particularly because I don't know if we could ever reverse any of that, or if there's anything what we can do about it, So I see you've been bringing your questions in. I'm kind of have to be clicking the comments today, so I've got to keep one eye on that. So do keep questions if you can, other than just comments. I'm going to bring Rocky in now, who's going to join me, and we'll have both come up on screen. We got some of the patrons coming and joining us by video as well, so that we're able to get video links in at the same time as we'll get your questions in as well. So let me introduce you to Ron Nordquist, if I've got your name right, and it is best known as Rocky. Hi there, Rocky. How are you doing?
Good morning. Hello.
Good to see you. So you're based in the USA, aren't you?
I am. I'm in Minnesota, and we're the land of 10,000 lakes here, so we've got a lot of water around us, but I'm an ocean fanatic, so that's what we're wanting to talk about today. So
yeah, I got to know you a little bit because I gave a reading for you, I remember, by Zoom, and and afterwards we had a little bit of a chat for a moment about some of the things that interest you. And from what I understood, you say an ocean fanatic, but you've spent large parts of your life, haven't you, trying to do something about the ocean. You were kind of one of the first people to start calling out the need for these things.
Well, somewhat indirectly, Craig. I love the water. I love the ocean. I'm a scuba diver. I love fish and all of the inhabitants. I started about 25 years ago, really motivated about repurposing and recycling So in my case, I've got about 40 years of experience already of working in the healthcare industry. So I've been focusing on acute care hospitals and ambulatory surgery centers throughout North America. And what I learned from that is that there is so much waste. A lot of it is plastic. When it comes to healthcare providers, it's a good target for me because they generate so much waste. So I started a long time ago, really around reuse and recycling. I had a previous company to the one I have right now, where we were focused on disposable or single patient labeled surgical instruments. So people would use these things once and then throw them away. So there were millions and millions of these devices that would get thrown away. So what I learned as time went on, healthcare providers generate about 767 million pounds of plastic waste annually. There's a ton of stuff that they use, and half of what people use and throw away when they're done with it ends up in the environment. And a large majority of that goes into the waterways that spill into the oceans.
I would have thought that medical waste was one of those things that is particularly toxic, isn't it? I mean, it's also surely don't they have to do something with it, sort of like COVID? I mean, they were shipping in huge quantities of plastics when the COVID epidemic happened here. I mean, Britain particularly, there was major scandals because people were just buying like mad to buy all this disposable stuff. And I often thought, how do you get rid of that if it's got COVID on it, or it's got any form of Legionnaires or all the other sort of bugs that it would carry? I mean,
Right.
isn't this? I mean, how do they go about getting rid of this? Because I know this is one of the major ocean pollutants that you were telling me before as well. The medical stuff. Where do they ship it? How do they get rid of it?
Well, there are multiple types of waste that healthcare providers generate. So I think you're worried about what they call either red bag waste or yellow bag waste. I worked all throughout Canada for years. I don't know if England, unfortunately, I've never been into Europe with what I was doing, but it might be called yellow bag waste there as well. But those are things that are contaminated by bodily fluids, mainly blood. So if it's very contaminated like that, it gets segregated out. And the pathway for that usually is it goes to a waste care provider, and they haul it off to a place that they can burn it. So it gets incinerated. So it's removed from the environment that way safely. But in an essence, that creates another form of air pollution because they burn this stuff.
It's kind of the worst.
Yeah. But when it comes to the other types of waste, it gets hauled off and it's sent to, typically people think it's all going into a landfill and contained. Unfortunately, it doesn't all get contained. And that's the stuff we worry about. So you're talking about plastic bottles and film materials and plastic bags and all the standard things that people can use and purchase on a daily basis. Well, hospitals generate all that and then some. They have film materials that they use for plastic packaging. They have hard, rigid plastics that they make instruments and devices out of. There are IV bags that are made out of plastic. So the problem with plastic is it's not going away. Year over year, it's growing by over 4% annually. There's millions and millions of tons that are increasing. Some of the stats, if you want me to talk about.
Well, you sent me some pictures, didn't you? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm going to put those up. We're going to bring you guys in a minute to have a chat and give us some questions and things. But let's have a look at. I'll put them up in the order that I've got them here. They might not. But
Sure.
the picture you sent from Chennai, for example. I mean, India. I saw the beaches near Chennai, and I saw things like that too while I was there.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to look at.
horrendous. And then
Yes.
the beauty, and under the guidance of America, we have Hawaii, of course. Not what I see when I think of Hawaii.
Right. So
And
think
then,
about when you think of Hawaii and you go on vacation and you get to the beach and you see this. It's just heartbreaking.
horrific. And then the Philippines. This is one of the worst polluting areas, I believe, in the world, isn't it? The Philippines.
It's one of them, yes.
Yeah, one of the dead spots, as they say. And then this stuff, you also said you were also saying that the problem with it is it becomes microplastics. This is when
Correct.
it breaks down, isn't it? This is when it
Yeah,
becomes.
and I was going to talk a little bit about that. So people don't always know that when plastics go in the water, I think a lot of people have heard about they call it the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. That's one of these areas in one of the areas they call gyres. There's about 5 major gyres in the world's oceans. And because of the currents, they just converge together and circle around like a big whirlpool. So there's tons of that material, kind of like the picture depicted, those different pictures. But what happens is that one photo that you showed, microplastics is a real problem. So a lot of people aren't aware of that. So they're estimating about 15 to 51 trillion microparticles of plastic all throughout the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, you can look across the beautiful blue landscape of the ocean, and lurking below that are all these small pieces of plastic.
And of course, we're ingesting it too. This is half
Yeah, so
the problem, isn't it? I mean, I just see Steve
I think you have some
Murray has come in and
pictures.
asked a question saying, is it right microplastics now found in fish catchers?
Right. Show that picture, Craig.
Yeah, you sent me a picture of this, didn't you? Here we go.
Yeah, here's a problem. So fish are confusing those little pieces of plastic with plankton and small targeted things that they eat. And so once it goes into their body, it doesn't go away. And there's another picture similarly with seabirds. So they're predicting by the year 2050, about 99% of all seabird species will be ingesting plastic. And it's just heartbreaking to see some of these pictures about autopsies they've done on birds. And
Yeah,
I think
you sent a picture of the birds as well, so that's
yeah.
pretty
I mean, that's
horrific.
pathetic. That's a baby chick, albatross baby chick that's been fed all this plastic by their parents. The parent bird confuses that for scallops and things they normally would eat, and ultimately it killed that young bird. So birds are eating it, fish are eating it. We're all actually eating it. It's all moving up the food chain. So not only is it in the water that we're talking about, but it's in the air we breathe.
Yeah.
It's in the soil. It goes up into the plant roots of plants, and it's basically everywhere.
And people are asking a few questions now. Let's bring a few people in then.
Sure.
Joaquin. Excuse my ignorance on this, says Kelly. Why can plastics only be recycled twice?
Well, that's not totally accurate. Depends on the type of plastic. I started a company called Infinity Blue, and it's really to focus on recycling and reusing plastic waste. And as I mentioned earlier, the initial focus was healthcare, just for the sheer numbers. So polypropylene is one of the bigger used plastic materials. You can actually recycle that about 4 to 5 cycles on polypropylene. Some of the other plastics that you're probably talking about, polystyrenes and things like that, have very limited turns or cycles.
Ethel's saying you cannot interfere in other countries' business. China's becoming richer and the West is becoming poorer because of all this nonsense environment. So obviously, I guess, Ethel, you kind of question whether we're right in saying about the environment. You call it the nonsense environment. Is that what you're meaning? I presume that's you're saying that there. But it is in many ways. I think personally, I think China has become a problem. I mean, the USA, that's a pretty big polluter too, isn't it? Rocky, at the moment, how does it compare to China and some of these other countries? Is
Well,
it
I read an article, and I
not?
think your impact with UK was, you said, about 2%. I think we're probably 8% of the
Yeah,
total.
someone said they thought
problem.
they was wrong. There's about 1%. Someone said on there, but sorry,
Okay.
the USA is.
I think it's like 8%. I think I've read
Yeah.
that overall. But the problem with plastics, a lot of people don't realize, not only does it break down and everybody's eating it, but they act like sponges. These little materials, they call them nurdles, act almost like a sponge, and it will absorb any pollutant, the chemical pollutions that are in the water. And so we're not only enjoying, eating plastic, but we're taking in these hazardous things into our body as well. The other problem that people don't think about is that all that plastic becomes an island, and you have invasive species that attach to some of these plastics that are flowing around, and they can literally act like little rafts to transport species of animals into other areas of the world and cause invasive problems that way as well. So
Yeah,
it's a
and of
big
course we also
problem.
get the problems with when we start upsetting the environment like this. I mean, you were saying about that albatross earlier on. I mean, it's trying to feed its young shellfish and things like that. That I believe that all the shellfish become thin, don't they? They can't form properly. It starts to create all down the food chain.
It
The,
does.
and I believe also that the most of this plastic doesn't float. We always think of the floating plastic. Those pictures you sent were about floating plastic mainly, but it's what we don't see, isn't it? Really, it's what we don't see. Where is it all going when it
It's
goes under the sea? And how long would it take for it to dissolve, or ever?
well, I'll tell you, with polypropylene plastic, it would take 20,000 years to decompose. So the reality is, it's not going away in our lifetime. And you hit the nail on the head. It's in all levels or layers of the ocean. It's not just on the surface. It is sinking. It's sinking all the way down to the deep depths of the ocean as well.
Yeah.
So they're finding it in the soil samples and in the ocean as well. So it's frightening. So about a stat, every minute of every day, a dump truck load of plastic equivalents ends up in the oceans. So it's very aggressive. We need to stop that. And
I
so
heard somewhere that by 2050, I think they said it was. I think I might be wrong with the date. They said by that time, or a short period of time, there's going to be more plastic in the ocean than there is what tonnage of fish. So that we got more plastic in the ocean than fish itself, and that's and when you think about that, the oceans are pretty big, and the tonnage must be gigantic to when you take that into account. Is there any alternative to plastics? People are asking. Hemp and corn syrup, for example, could be better for the environment.
they are trying. They are trying to come up with some alternate packaging instead of using plastics, biocompostable materials. But I think we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
I think, and I'm blessed to be here today, Craig, to talk to you about this. My goal as an individual is just to at least make people aware of the ocean. A lot of people aren't that familiar with it. Maybe not everybody dives, scuba dives, but we all like to maybe look at it or wade in it and go to beaches. And the oceans are our most valuable asset. So I think what the biggest takeaway I know of is to stop plastics from that route where they're taking to end up in the water. If you can prevent that to begin with, we're all better off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Well, let's bring in. I've got a few of the patrons in. I've got Jana in and Pat in. I'll bring Jana. Are you going to be okay to come in? Just nod. Yeah. I'm going to bring Jana in to ask some questions now. Maybe ask. Yes, you with us? And I'll bring Pat in as well. Perhaps we could do a group little talk. Okay. So we're all in now. Okay. So
Hello.
hi there. So any thoughts?
Hi.
Either of you?
I'm just wondering what we could use instead of the plastic everywhere, like Tupperware to keep food, from spoiling. What can we use instead?
Okay, your link is a bit slow, but yeah, we got that, didn't we? Rocky. What can we? I mean, I know you're recycling it. That's a great thing to do. We're going to need plastic. Plastics are very valuable, aren't they? I mean, we undervalue plastic. What a tremendous material it is. It's not an evil. It's a good thing, but we use it wrongly, particularly with disposable plastics. But are there some alternatives? You've obviously must have thought about this quite a lot, Rocky. What could we suggest?
Well, I think I'm just a little guy. I think what I've seen is that one of the biggest polluters of plastic are plastic straws. That little item alone, there's just so much that ends up in the environment. People are becoming aware of trying to ban the use of plastic straws. If you go to a restaurant, go out to eat, it used to be standard that you always had a straw when they delivered you a glass of water. Those things are changing. So if we can reduce the amount of that type of material, maybe switch over to, I know in my case, we bought aluminum straws instead of plastic ones. So if you want to use it, you're not throwing that out every time you use one of those.
Well, here in the UK, I know that McDonald's have now started to use paper straws again. And I've seen also some of the big brands like Johnson and Johnson are using like for the cotton earbuds things. Not, they don't call them ears, cotton buds on the sticks. I use them for my ears. You're not supposed to. They're using cardboard now, and in the shops we're still using plastic all the time for the bags. I mean, when I was a kid, we wouldn't think twice about it. Everything was in paper bags. I don't see why we can't do that again. And it seems to me that the solutions are already there. Really, surely it's just we just need to be prepared to spend on it. Surely.
Yeah, I think if you limit the amount of things that you buy that are easy to throw away and end up in the environment, maybe we can prevent reusing or buying those types of items. I know I've got reusable bags for grocery. If I don't have that with me, I get the paper bag because it is recyclable, very easy to recycle. Instead of, giving you a plastic bag to take your groceries home in. Simple things like that.
Pat, I see you're still with me.
John. One thing that really annoys me is that I get my shopping delivered. It's all wrapped up in all kinds of things, and there is nothing on there to say how you can recycle it or whether you can recycle it. And I feel that that's something that manufacturers could address. In fact, I think it ought to be the law that manufacturers have to put it on packaging, whether it can be recycled and how and where you can recycle it.
Or shouldn't they be sent? Shouldn't they be forced to pay a part towards that packaging?
Yes. Yeah.
Returnable packaging, so you put a deposit on it. And I'm sure if we were to everything, standardized sizes, standardized boxes. I mean, because every box on the shelf is all different shapes and sizes. Why can't we just have one and you can put a different label on it? That bottle can be returned as a universal bottle. Or
do you remember when we were children, everything was in glass bottles and you took it back to the shop and you got threepence?
Yeah.
You used to take it back and all the kids would collect up all the glass bottles. I mean, we couldn't wait to recycle them. So we'd take it back to the shop and they'd refill it.
Yeah, I remember.
Absolutely.
When I was a child, they used to recycle all the milk milk top box.
Oh, yes.
Milk
Oh,
bottles
yes.
used to have the
Collecting
oil on
milk
the
bottle
top.
tops.
And my nan would collect them all because they used to collect it all for the war effort.
That's
They
right.
would
Yeah.
use it because
Well,
they
I don't
needed
remember the
everything to be
war,
metal.
but I do remember collecting
That's where it
milk
came
bottle
from, I
tops.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it should be on every package how and where you can recycle something.
Absolutely. I think we do need something like that. But
A
let's
little bit
focus
of
on some of the,
education, I think, would go a long way.
yeah. Well, thanks for contributing, Pat. I'm going to take you out for a minute now, right? And we're going to see what some of the others are. So don't forget, guys, put your questions in. What do you think? Put your comments, put your thoughts, and don't forget after the show too. Remember to put your thoughts and questions and comments as well. What do you think about this situation? Is there anything we can do about it? What is the future for the world when it's like this? When we have this, can we solve it? Or are we conning ourselves? Are we? Is it all an exaggerated fraud? If you think that, put your comments in as well about that, because we want to get all views on this. But how would you go about sorting things? So let's take a few more questions in and thoughts in. It was the law to use paper bags, but in COVID everybody stopped. I don't know. That might apply. I think you're in America, Alexander, aren't you? I think, from what I remember. Yeah, I don't know. Was that the case? Paper bags.
I didn't see that. But...
No, I don't think it was the law. Maybe in some states it's been the law to use paper bags. They've stopped using some of the thinner bags here in the UK. I don't know what the rules are in America about disposable plastic bags. In America, do you have disposable plastic bags a lot still, or can people just get as many as they want, Rocky? Or
I haven't witnessed a reduction that way. Like I said, you can make a conscious decision to use a paper bag versus a plastic bag. When people throw these things away, we have recycling in our communities. I'm assuming that's pretty standard now. So you can segregate it out to a single source recycling stream from your home, and it goes to a material recovery facility. They call them MRFs, and they get sorted out. So you can recycle these plastic bags, but it's a problem. It's hard to, especially that material, those film bags and the thin plastics are hard on equipment to separate those things out.
Yeah, because you're dealing with the sort of quite heavy duty sort of plastics with your business, I guess. The hospital stuff. I mean, that's probably a different type of plastic to the sort of polythenes and those, because there's all different types of plastic, isn't there? I mean, I know that when we do our recycling, you've got to take the lids off the plastic screw tops and put those in one bin and the other one in another, because one can be recycled, one part can't be. So
and the plastic cap is a polypropylene and the bottle is a polyethylene.
And I guess medical equipment polypropylenes, is it that type of plastic? I don't know, I'm curious.
Yeah, there's various different types depending on what the product is. So on the package itself, they might have a film material that might be made out of polyethylene, but the product itself might be polypropylene. And the problem is you can't mix those two materials together when you try to recycle them. You need to segregate that out. So your point was a good one. Plastic bottle is made on different plastic versus the cap. So unfortunately, they use different types of plastic to suit their purpose.
So what happens with the gear that you get all this plastic, right? So what's the process then to turn this into something that's reusable? And is it? I mean, what's the carbon footprint for that? I remember when we were in America over there, we were doing some stuff in California, and we went to Begley. I can't remember his first name. He's well known over in America. The Begleys. They have their own channel here, and lovely fella. But he was showing me around his they were building this house that was going to be completely 100% environmentally friendly, and it was all made of steel. And I looked at it and said, well, look, this is all steel lining you've got here. The footprint on steel is enormous. The amount of energy that it takes to make this steel is going to be far outweigh any benefits that this house would have in the long term. You know, he didn't like that comment much. And he came with a humorous retort because he's been a comedian. He was on the Fonz and things, wasn't he? But I mean, is it the same with what you're trying to do with recycling plastics? Definitely better than chucking it in the sea. But what's the carbon footprint on that? How difficult is it to do this without pumping stuff into the air, for example, or using a lot of energy? Is it energy expensive?
So what we're focused on is to take that material and work it through a process called pelletizing or pelletization, and it develops a little BB-looking resin material. That process is very environmentally friendly. It's a closed system. We capture it right there in the building and collect it in large containers of different sorts. And then it can be used to injection mold other products from it. So we're not trying to get away from a lot of those devices. Instead of using the virgin plastic material, we're hoping to gather enough of a supply of the recycled materials so that you can make an impact like you're talking about for carbon gas emissions. So you can reduce the CO2 impact on the environment by doing that. If the product can't be recycled, if it's, well, for instance, if it's ocean destined plastic, there's some great companies that are collecting that material manually. If you get that mixed plastic, there's not a lot you can do unless you segregate those types of plastics out, which is a lot of effort, labor. But you can take that collection and work it through a process they call pyrolysis. And that generates like an oil material that you can then use to make other plastics again from that. Short of that, if they can't get, there's not too many of those companies in this country that do that, or I don't know if there's that many in England that can do that, but it gets burned. That's the problem. If it's all collection of different types of plastics, they burn it. It's incinerated.
One of the thoughts I had is one day oil's going to run out. I mean, mankind's been here for millions of years, and we've been using up millions of years worth of oil, which has been deposited from the plants and dinosaurs and things from the past. When it runs out, we start, you know, because we've got so much oil, we can burn it and we can even use it to power our cars, you know, and but it's going to become an extremely valuable resource later on, because we can't really make plastics or the sort of the quality of plastics from any other material other than oil, because once it's gone, the oil that's left we're going to want to use for making plastics. You know, we need it for certain you know, for our modern era. All around me as I'm sat in this room, there's plastics everywhere. But eventually when it starts to run out, it's going to become a valuable material. And it makes me wonder, perhaps in, you know, the centuries to come, when oil's gone and the last of the oil that we could have used for plastics is gone, would we be able to go back under the sea and start to pull it out again and sort of recycle this plastic that's been there for donkeys of years? Does the plastic become unrecyclable? I mean, does it become, if you were able, because it became a valuable material, if we could go to the bottoms of the sea in future generations and want to bring it all back and say, oh, I found a plastic bottle that's worth a fortune, right? Would it be reusable again, even after centuries? Or does it get to a point where it just becomes so worthless that it really is, we just have to leave it until it's, you know, the 20,000 years or so before it's deteriorated? Or can the really, what I'm saying is, can the sort of cracked half deteriorated plastics be recycled in any way, or reused or repurposed, like you're doing with the medical equipment?
I think it's a hard story, Craig. I know that it degrades. So over time, because of the salinity in the water, it's going to start breaking it down and degrading that quality of the plastic. So it's pretty finicky to be able to recreate more plastic resins from recycled product unless you can really get it in a fairly good state, for lack of better words.
I read somewhere, I read some of the, I think they can, you can get bacterias that can eat oil and will basically chew it up. And, you know, I mean, oil pollution always looks the worst, but it's probably the least of our problems compared to what's under the sea. Could there be something the same with plastics? I mean, has there been any moves or anything, do you know, to maybe genetically change a bacteria so it can eat plastic and put it into the sea to chew it up and get rid of it that way? I don't know. Is that?
There are bacteria that will eat plastic. You're right. It is something that's out there that can do that.
So there's hope yet for the worst of it then. And I presume ultimately we might be able to clean the seas up if we can't reuse it, repurpose it. And we might be able to actually make it work again. Yeah. Let's have a look at some of the other questions coming up here. Let's see what comments people have got. I always take my backpack with a plastic bag inside when going shopping. Yeah. I think people are becoming much more conscious about the need to stop this. But every time I order anything particularly from Amazon, first of all, it's a box that's 10 times the size in cardboard of what I need. And then inside that, there's always this blow plastic type of, I don't know what they call it, when they must have, it's like it's been ballooned onto the products, which you can never get open. It's definitely pensioner proof. And you're having to hack away with a pair of scissors or a knife in order to get, at the end, a tiny little bit of electronics or something, whatever's been sent to you. I mean, surely that type of plastic, is that completely one-use plastic, or is that sort of plastic salvageable? And why do they do it that way? It looks to me so expensive because you've got all packaging and a tiny little product, you know. Economically, it must be a difficult one to justify, I would have thought now.
When you think of the supply chain and the way the businesses are set up, it takes a major change to get people to look at exploring other options like you're talking about. Can you recycle that? Yeah, you can, you know, if you segregate it out, you can take the time and effort to do that. It's possible. I think it's easier for people right now for what it's worth, for what I've seen, is if it's all collected like that and they incinerate it, they can generate electricity from that. So it's not a complete waste of time. But it's really not what we were hoping to see on a wide scale.
Yeah. It seems to me, it feels like a hopeless... it seems hopeless for those comments I just put up there. They're all people that are trying consciously to do something, all want to do their little bit, and we're all trying to do our little bit. But meanwhile, the big companies, they don't give a damn. They'll throw it at us. Is there legislation? Has there been moves to legislation to really start to? I mean, I don't know how it is in America. I don't know anything about the legislation here, but you know, since you've been in the business, have you seen any promises of promising legislation that might actually start to address the sheer scale of plastic that we're using, particularly disposable plastic, single-use plastic? Is there any hope? You know, I think that's what we want to know. Is there any hope? You're an expert, Rocky. Help us.
I think there is hope. I think some of these large, well, let's pick on the beverage companies because of the plastic bottles. They're working on changing some of their material that they use in making those packaging, those bottles and things like that. Not to digress, but things like shampoo. I mean, I actually just recently ordered and have been using, and I love it. Shampoo that's
I don't have that problem.
That's good.
Sorry. Yeah.
But just eliminating the bottles. They're like little bricks, like a little puck, and you wet them and you shampoo and or conditioner. I think there's companies that are focused on different things, toothpaste and laundry detergent. I've gone to different types of laundry detergent materials that are mixed with water, so you don't have a big plastic bottle. So, and there's companies that are starting to make little sheets that look like dryer sheets, but they're actually the detergent themselves. So there's things that people are becoming more and more aware of, that by a simple change, we can reduce that amount of plastic waste being generated, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got to start thinking. I think we need more innovation as well, don't we? I think, I'm sure if you were to say to companies, right, you can't use plastic anymore, surprise, surprise, they'd probably come up with something pretty damn quick, actually. Some questions here coming in asking about the practicalities of this. Do you need oil in order to produce plastic? If it's going to be limited due to the closure of pipelines, perhaps plastic will not be produced in the future. Did you see a future for plastic, Rocky? Or is there an alternative?
I think it's always going to be here. That pipeline disaster reduced some of the oil going to England and Germany and various different areas. You're right, but it's increasing. If you look at a chart and look at plastic production, it's exploded. It's quadrupled in the last 30 years, the amount of plastic that's being produced and used. So you do need oil. The price of oil going up and down affects the price of plastic material because it is produced from oil. So, yeah, I don't see scalability. I don't really see something that's going to take the place of plastic altogether. Not with the technology that we have today.
No. And it's also, I think we undervalue that plastic is actually one of the most amazing materials there is. I remember when I was in India, we were on a bus, and it was so old, the bus, that some of the moldings were actually made of Bakelite, the first forms of plastic, and the technology has gone on and given us plastics and polythenes and polystyrenes, and we think all these are awful things, but they're also extremely good things as well. It's like everything has a good side and a bad side, doesn't it? And I think to demonize plastic in many ways is the wrong attitude. What's wrong is our use of it, our disregard for how we use it and how we dispose of it. And with guys like you sort of saying, look, a large part of this plastic can be reused, particularly the difficult stuff like you deal with the medical stuff. Surely the problems must be in the sheer greed of society again, and the greed of politicians who get backhanders for these things and bribes and all the rest, and donations to their parties, to see that the negative stuff in the world, like plastics and gums and all the rest of it, stay in the domain, when I'm sure couldn't we kind of quite quickly resolve this problem? I don't think we've got a wonderful material that has transformed the world in many ways. Plastic has brought the modern age. We couldn't have many of the things that we take for granted without some form of plastic in them. You couldn't, most of the electronic stuff, you couldn't house it all in metals and things like that. You need the plastics.
Well, it is a wonderful invention. Do you realize that every piece of plastic ever produced is still it's still out there. It exists today. Wow. So that's part of the problem. But you hit a nail on the head. If you look at it as a valuable commodity after it's been used, instead of just saying, well, it's waste, and out of sight, out of mind, we just throw it out into the environment. That's kind of what we're talking about. My goal was to try and repurpose and reuse as much of this stuff that we could collect so it doesn't keep going into the environment. That's the impact I personally was hoping to be able to contribute to. But just to be aware, everybody is now becoming enlightened how bad it is and making some minor changes. It all starts with us.
Yeah.
We're all individuals that can make an impact. And if you think about it as a valuable commodity, not just waste, I think opens up a lot of doors with what we want to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, the people that have joined us today, we're just coming to the end of the show now, but I mean, most people that come to this channel are quite spiritually minded people. We care about the environment. We want the future world to be something there that our kids can enjoy and our grandkids can enjoy. We love the beauty of nature. I think naturally spiritually minded people think like that, and we think longer term. We think not just about our own selfish lives, but we also think about what we leave in for others after this. And I think really, but the good thing now, I think, is it is reaching out to everybody. And lots of people still deny it with, it's a load of nonsense. There's not, they're lying to us. And the conspiracy theorists sometimes say that these things are exaggerated. But the fact is, we can see it with our own eyes, and we can all make our little bit of a difference ourselves. And I think at the end of the day, we will beat it. I think we will beat it in the end. I think we will. And I think the first step, from what I've talked with you today, I think the first step is to really start to see it as a valuable commodity, not to demonize it, to see it as something that can be used and reused and reused. And it's just our management of it that's gone wrong, isn't it, really? It's the fact that we've always put profit first. And when we put profit first, we always end up in trouble, don't we? Anyway, Rocky, I'm going to say thank you for joining me today. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
I just want to say to everybody that, go and have a look at Rocky's website. It's a simple little website, but you're welcome to, I think people are welcome to get in touch if they're interested in what you do.
Yeah, please do.
And of course, if any of the bigger businesses are out here too, I know quite a lot of influential people watch this channel sometimes. Please go and have a look at Rocky's website. Get in touch, see if there's anything you can do, particularly if you're dealing with medical products and those type of plastics that we've talked about today. Because if we're going to do our spiritual work, it's got to also reach out to the industries as well, spiritualize everything. Anyway, I'm going to say thank you for Rocky for joining us.
Thank you, and it's infinityblue.com is the company. But thank you so much.
It's in the description. Say it again.
Oh, good. Infinity-blue, like the color blue.com.
Okay, and it's in the description below. So you're particularly on YouTube, you can see it in the description. A phone call coming. You can get that now. Well, thanks very much, Rocky, for your help there today. It's been fabulous, and thanks everybody for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed this. We kind of slightly different show today because we brought the guests in. We like to bring guests in from time to time, and put them. Expose them to you lot, who've got lots of questions, but I know you guys have got good hearts, and I hopefully this has helped a little bit, particularly. And I didn't realize Earth Day was coming up just like that too, so that's very, very interesting that we've got that. So I just sort of put a few of your last comments up just on the screen. I see you've been enjoying this. You're concerned for the future of your children there, aren't you? Supermarket, what else you've enjoyed it. Good. I'm glad you've been enjoying this. Put your comments afterwards, please. Let me see what you have to say about this, afterwards, because I'm interested in this topic as well, of course, and it was good timing, wasn't it? Just to catch it at the right time. So we will try to bring more guests on as we get the chances to do this. And I really do thank Rocky for making a really interesting show with us today. And if you've been following the show, if you've been enjoying the show, don't forget, please become a patron. If you can become a patron, it helps us to keep this whole thing going. I know we've not been doing it from the studio today, but it has been, we do need your help always as patrons, because that helps us keep our thing going here as well. So now I am alone here without the help of Matt. I need to sort of find the end. There we go. So I'm going to say goodbye to you all, and thank you for all of you that have been patrons. Thank you for the patrons that have came on today. Thank you for Pat, and thank you for Jana for coming on and posing their questions too. And thank you for all of your support to make all this possible. See you soon. Bye for now.